Hello and welcome back. I'm Eric Sunset, your host of the Doc Buddy Journal. Here at Doc Buddy, of course, we deliver healthcare solutions that take the pain and cost out of broken workflows. You can learn more about our solutions like On Call, OpNote, and Enterprise at docbuddy.com. And today we've got a special guest, which is Jessica Walsh. Jessica is the CEO and founder of Rx Bandz. And just for a little bit about her background, Jessica is an innovator and seasoned entrepreneur with wide ranging experience that includes project management for a world leading construction and engineering firm. And she is now focused on the next generation of patient centric auto injectors to deliver a wide range of injectable medications by anyone, anytime, anywhere. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate it. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
We're really glad to have you. And we love to share a little bit of the spotlight with those in healthcare that are truly changing the game, shifting the paradigm, if I can use a really tired cliche, but it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, we're really, our entire team has come together to make such a huge difference for patients around the world who need to carry emergency injectable medication. Maybe first I should tell you, I carry an auto injector. That's how RX bands came about. I was prescribed to carry an auto injector with me at all times, and I found that they're really big and bulky, and there's just no great way to carry them. So when I went running, I ended up duct taping it to my arm. I looked ridiculous. It was so embarrassing. And I knew there had to be a better way. And sometimes you need to drive the change you want to see in the world. So I created our expanse, and here we are today with just so fortunate to have brought together such an amazing team that has been able to get us to where we are.
Well, and it's this is going to be a terrible double entendre so early in the show, but you've got literal skin in the game, literal and figurative skin in the game, needing to haul around an auto injector. That's that's a point of focus here at Doc Buddy and for our podcast. There's sort of an old way that people just kind of accept this is how it is. I don't really
Yeah.
have a choice, and it may not be a good way, but I'm stuck with it. But that's fixed mindset, not growth mindset. So tell us a little bit about the path to what you're creating. You have the big, bulky, and for those that are just listening, Jessica flashed a gigantic auto injector, but that's the old way. There's a new way. Tell us how you got to that point.
Right. So going way back when our auto injectors expire each year, and when mine did, I'm the type of person who likes to take things apart. And and I thought, why is this so expensive? What's inside of it? And I realized that our needle is about this big and our glass cartridge, that there's got to be a better way. It's just like this is designed really back in World War II. The design hasn't substantially changed since then. And if you think of it as like if that was your phone booth, like we have iPhones now, like we need to update our technology to to increase patient compliance and ultimately save lives. So at least for people who have anaphylaxis, having your auto injector close at hand, it means the difference between life or death. And also for conditions such as for people who have pain or diabetes or risk for overdose, I mean, seconds count. So we want to give people something that they can carry and have with them in a time of need.
And obviously, when we're considering patient compliance to not only carrying but using their autoinjector in the case of something like anaphylaxis, there's only one good outcome there, and that's that you use your autoinjector, of course. I kind of keyed on something you said though around patient compliance, where the stakes are maybe slightly less than life or death. And I'm certainly a layperson. Correct me if I'm not using the correct terminology there. But what do you see, or what's the aim for a more portable auto injector for patient compliance? Like, what do you expect the outcomes to be there?
Right. So, okay, with if you look at something like anaphylaxis, you have 5 minutes or less to have a shot of epinephrine for it to be most effective. The same things of where, so our company is developing auto injectors. We've developed a platform of auto injectors, but also life saving formulations. So if you, we're working on a reformulation of TXA. So it's our own proprietary formulation that can stop non compressible hemorrhages. So, when you're thinking about the dynamics of that, someone is bleeding to death. There's 14 million women develop postpartum hemorrhage. 55,000 of them die each year. So when you can make that change and save those lives from moving from a drug that's delivered through IV, I mean, I can imagine both of us would want to help. You see someone bleeding to death, and I can't start an IV. Well, maybe you can, and I'm sure a lot of your readers can, but can you deliver an auto injector, a shot of TXA faster with an auto injector? And most people can, especially even for the military, in the back of a Black Hawk or a tank. It's as simple as just like pulling off a cap and pressing against their leg. And we thought, wow, it's like, if we do this work, how many lives can we change? Not just for the person who's at risk, but their entire family, where it takes generations to recover. So that is like our goal is we started off with epinephrine, but then we said, who else can we help? We were fortunate enough that the military reached out to us and they said, what can you put in here? I'm like, really, we can deliver anything short of peanut butter. Listen, okay, anti-chemical warfare agents, right? Hydromorphone, ketamine, TXA, non-compressible hemorrhages, and the list goes on. And where they need something that's lighter and easier to carry. I mean, for them, ounces equals pounds. And you look at that correlation between the military and then also patient compliance. It's just like kids are bullied for having to carry their auto injector. I mean, like moms are fighting with their kids. The kids are like, I don't want to carry it. And we've gotten letters saying, soon as my child goes off to school, he's going to ditch his auto injector. But by making something that's so small that will fit in the tiny pocket of your jeans, you remove that stigma and just make it so easy for it to be there when you need it most. And then there's also the environmental compliance part of it as well too. If you look at the waste and the plastic that's going into our waters, so let's reduce the overall footprint. Let's reduce the size. Let's think about medical device innovation in a different way that can make a difference and be impactful. And and that's really the crux and the core and the ethos behind what we're doing.
Let's dial into that a little bit too, because the old way sounds like maybe some of these drugs are more readily available as an IV injected solution, and sometimes that's not an option, either for lack of expertise or in exceptionally austere conditions. You We spoke before recording that in some cases that might be the battlefield, as you said. That may
Mhm.
also be the delivery of medicine in a very rural environment, maybe with no healthcare infrastructure, maybe not in America. So, can you speak to that? Like, what's the alternative? What are people doing now in those
Right.
circumstances?
So, for example, you look at again postpartum hemorrhage. So, number one preventable death in the military and maternal deaths worldwide. Right. So you have medullas who aren't able to start IVs. So that time starts ticking, and the every minute that passes, the person's life is at risk. So they have to, you look at ambulances, the EMS system in the United States. We have paramedics, they can start IVs, EMTs can't. So by taking that shift and saying, let's reduce the need for that advanced medical training, for point of care injury. Get them to a hospital, get them to that facility where they can be properly cared for. But we always talk about this golden hour. And so in some cases it's less. So we want to be able to get patients to a place where they have a chance of survival, because right now they don't have the appropriate options. I mean, carrying an outdated auto injector, people get laxed. I almost like to think of it as when you first have a child, the first child, people sterilize everything, but the second child, the binky drops in the ground, they're like, they brush it off. It's that's what patients are doing with their auto injectors. They carry it. Patient compliance is a little bit higher in the beginning, but then it drops off. They're like, no, I'll be careful. And we hear stories of, and they're heartbreaking, of uh, uh, I'll share a story of a teenage boy who was going out on a date, and he wanted to look cool, and he didn't have his auto injector with him, and it was exposed to an allergen. They went back to his place, and by then it was too late because he needed to get his auto injector, and he didn't make it. And it's like, if we can take this and we can make it so it, like, it fits in the tiniest pocket of your, like, of your littlest jeans. It just slides right in, right? It's like, now I can carry this in a yoga pants pocket, or we've given it accessory attachments so that an alligator clip for an active kid who has sports shorts who doesn't want to carry it. So if you look at what our current options are now versus where we could be, it's leaps and bounds. And I see such a huge opportunity for so many injectable medications to move there, but also for doctors when they're looking at that. Then when you're prescribing to patients, is this something that they're going to carry? Are they going to understand how to use it? I mean, currently, auto injectors can be so confusing and it's intimidating. And we ask, which one hurts less, right? And they always say the large one. And I've been there where you say, maybe it won't be that bad. I'll just wait. Maybe it will go away. And then that's where people risk their lives.
Yeah, and that patient compliance aspect is so critical across all phases of care, whether that's your doctor advising you that maybe fast food 10 times a week is too much. You need to be accountable to your own outcomes to some extent. And that the tragedy you shared of the boy on the date, that happened even this week. I believe the story came out of Texas. It was a prank gone wrong. Peanuts in football cleats, and didn't really think this kid was allergic, but he was. I believe he received the care that he needed to avoid dying. But you're in control until you're not.
Absolutely. People uh, who say, "Oh, eat around it," or wait staff that just isn't properly trained. There's there's so many ways that this can happen unexpectedly. And you start to feel for a while safe. Oh, I haven't had an anaphylactic reaction for a while. And I think that's where we need to be sure people at least have an option to be able to keep themselves safe. It should be easy. Life itself is difficult enough, and the fact that they have to be kept at room temperature, I was like, what is that, like 5 days out of the year? I was like, no, I want something that's built for health, and also designed for my life. That then currently, that when I saw that doesn't exist, it's such a huge need, and we in life sciences can do better. And I think that's really the core of of what we're trying to do to ultimately save those lives for patients, to make EMTs' lives easier for third world countries who don't have access to the proper or advanced medical training to be able to give an IV or even drop the proper dose in a needle and syringe, and also for our military who put their lives at risk for us. They should, they deserve the proper equipment.
Absolutely. And with a device that size, there's no excuse that you couldn't have one in a cargo pocket or, handy in your first aid kit, no matter where you are. And Jessica, I want to be sure we get it on the record. I think most of our listeners will be familiar with TXA and the acronym there. Can I put you on the spot? What does TXA stand for?
Tranexamic acid, so it stops non-compressible hemorrhages.
Okay.
So
thanks for
yeah,
humoring me on the pop quiz there.
yeah, no, happy to explain. It's
But as an adult, I would imagine, like it stinks to carry around a huge auto injector, but I don't want to pay that huge price. I got to imagine that's a huge sort of peace of mind for parents where, like, a kid, to be trusted with their own backpack full of school supplies, let alone a life saving auto injector. I mean, that's through the lens I'm looking at, that's truly a shift to the new way as opposed to the old way of, here's the thing as big as a ruler. I got to leave my 6 year old in charge of it, right? Like, that's got to be a huge value add for parents.
Oh, absolutely. It needs to be cost effective. People need to be able to afford this. And also, you look at some of the new family dynamics now. You have one needs to be at mom's home, maybe one needs to be at dad's home. You have to have one at the school. And that starts to add up to be a mortgage payment for some people. And families shouldn't have to make the choice between keeping their children safe or keeping a roof over their head. So often parents like they forego or push past the expiration date. So one of the things that we're doing with our auto injectors, we spoke with patients to find out what their real needs were and to build that into our device. So we wanted to make it affordable. It has to be reliable. It has to be easily carried. We know that people drop things in puddles or in worse places than that, right? Like it needs to meet our military special forces needs. So you look at the needs for like a 12-year-old child and our special forces, it's there's a lot of similarities there. But it's that's where like our devices should be designed from. And somehow I feel like the products that we've been traditionally getting have been coming out of a lab, and yeah, sometimes they make them a little bit less expensive, but I'm like, that's not innovation. Like I like other parents, it's just a groundswell of frustration with what we've been getting. So I thought this is really, it's a time for a change. And I think this parallels to other areas of our healthcare system when you really start to question things and ask why, like, this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? And sometimes you have to be the change you want to see in the world. Is and and not give up, because obviously making these changes, especially in life sciences, is not easy and it's not fast, and it can be really expensive, and it requires an incredible team. But I don't think any of us would be in it if we didn't love it.
Well, and why do you think that is? And I can try my hand at a cynical guess. Why do you think it is that change hasn't happened yet? Because to your earlier point, we walk around with a mini computer every day that's also a digital camera. You can talk to anybody on the world with it. And that change happened pretty rapidly, right? And there's a big difference between consumer and life sciences. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Is this so? Here's the cynical try that the mega manufacturers say, hey, we got a production line set up. We have 10 million units of plastic that we already have accounted for through the next 5 years. And this is what people are getting. or is it something else?
Yeah, it takes a lot to be able to innovate. I can tell you, we found many ways not to do it. It is not easy, and it's a long haul to get through FDA approval, to validate manufacturing lines, to just like so many steps to make sure that you can clear through human factors, that your device is safe and effective and easy to use. So there's so many steps, and then at any point in time, there's always those risks where you may have to go back and say, okay, we need to fix this. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, this, we've created the world's smallest auto injector, but to the path to get there was not overnight. And I think in many ways it's really easy for people to say, oh well, we're this is what an auto injector looks like. We're going to make slight innovations. There's less risk and a little less innovation. It takes a lot. I have to applaud the all companies out there who are trying to make substantial changes to the way the status quo and how things have always been done.
Yeah, well, one of the things you mentioned just a bit ago is the involvement for the U.S. Special Forces and dealing with the DoD. I got a kick out of that because sometimes the Venn diagram of child and Special Forces use on an item is probably not a Venn diagram; it's just a circle because they overlap completely. But that human factor, I mean, sure, you can design a very small auto injector, but then what goes into ensuring that it's going to work? Like that's the kicker, right?
Right. So testing and so much testing. So for our auto injector for epinephrine is emergency use. So we have to hit what we call five nines in terms of reliability, which means it has to be 99.999% reliable. So we have to test that in the freezing cold and thaw it out. We have to test it in elevations to make sure that it's safe to fly. So there is a ton of work. Drop testing, as you can imagine with the military, the underwater sand, grit. So it has to really withstand the rigors of what our military will put it through, because it has to work, especially when your life depends upon it.
And to your point, for any listeners who are maybe not so statistically minded, there ends up being a huge difference between 99.9 and then any additional nines that follow. That is not hundredth of a point, thousandth of a point. Over time, that ends up being a big number.
Absolutely. And when you think about that testing, someone's life is at stake. So your team has to be diligent and precise and unrelenting in terms of making sure that your performance will meet those standards.
And if I can, Jessica, switch gears just a little. Before we recorded, one of the other value adds of an auto injector this size and this deployable, I guess, moving us away from these austere conditions our warfighters may find themselves in, was a hospital, was a surgery center. That for certain drugs, you may not run them through the same IV line as other drugs, or maybe even any drug. So would you speak a little bit for our listeners that are in these more classic care settings in the US where that will either save them time, save them money, or both?
Absolutely. So for TXA, especially if you're thinking about our medics, and then also in hospitals as well too. So that's just one example where you need to have a dedicated IV line. You're not going to run certain drugs through the same IV line. So having an auto injector really becomes a workforce multiplier. It saves time and effort, especially when people are working in conditions where their hands are wet or bloody or muddy. And if, again, trying to set an IV line in the back of a tank or up in a Black Hawk, this is not always optimal. So if we can make it work out in these austere conditions and then also in the hospital settings, it becomes a workforce multiplier for everyone involved in that life cycle.
Yeah, just to keep our focus on the more classic healthcare setting, if we can, if you have any thoughts, you mentioned earlier some of the myriad of problems with healthcare in the U.S. Would if you could wave a magic wand, what do you think you would fix first?
Oh, for in the or traditional healthcare, like, I would
Right.
love. You're right. So right now we have an opportunity to change the way things are done. For example, if you look at what we just went through with COVID, we have one healthcare provider paired up with one patient. And again, that's like, and as you think of how many people had to be vaccinated, so I think there's a real opportunity to think outside the box and say, if you look at that as like a manufacturing system, or any other sort of system, that is not optimal. So if we could do something like taking vaccines, putting them in auto injectors, and being able to send them to people, you wouldn't have people waiting and dying because they were not vaccinated or received the proper care that they need. It gives us the opportunity to reduce the need for advanced medical training, so then those people can focus on things that do require those skills. That's not a process that we should have been having to tie up people with that level of training. They could have been doing taking other actions to be able to save lives. So I think if we look at some of these larger issues, such as how we vaccinate people around the world, to get them the medications that they need, it is just enormous opportunity to look at how where heart attacks, for example, and the crash cart where people are having to drop meds. Here's another example where you can have someone who you say, give them a red, a green, and a blue, and being able to help in that way. So I think if we start looking this as a workforce multiplier in areas that it hasn't traditionally been used, there's a real opportunity for to improve efficiency.
Yeah, and efficiency and adoption of a vaccine. That's not the right phraseology, but it's kind of been odd. And we want to walk a fine line here that you are seeing more and more news like there's a measles outbreak, there's a mumps outbreak, and we've had this MMR vaccine for how many decades now, and people are just saying, not doing it for my kid. That's the choice that they make, and I
Absolutely.
don't have a lot to comment on there. Do you think there's any value add though that if something like an MMR vaccine was delivered to your house, maybe via Amazon, maybe Prime, same day? I don't know. We're
Right.
talking wild, wave the magic wand here. But if somebody could hold the auto injector device that delivers a trusted vaccine, something like MMR, do you think that would impact the adoption rate for or the inoculation rate of a given vaccine? Like, is that a path you see unfolding?
Oh, absolutely. One, because if you look at this, you don't have to go anywhere. That you look at the time and the effort, and then also, oh, for seniors who often had to have people drive them. There's I really believe that if you can if you can have something in your home, and the, that you don't see the needle. That's another thing, that needle phobia. Or so you're just
Sure.
like, seeing like grown men faint, I'm like, I could almost be in there as well too. It's just with an auto injector, for at least for ours, that was one of the things. It injects and fully retracts in under a fourth of a second, so it becomes its own sharps container, and it's almost over and done with before you can even flinch. So that's a benefit. It's like, how many people would rather not see the needle? Well, it's like the healthcare industry, many people are just like, fine, you see it every day. But from the patient side, it's the kids when they see that needle coming.
Yeah, it's like a psychological torture experiment. Not only does the needle come out, but in a lot of cases you're drawing from a vial, and then we're going to point it into your arm. Like, that's, if you're not a fan of needles or have an aversion to them, that's like the worst case scenario. You watch it happen in slow motion.
Yeah, it's remove that fear, right? It's let's give people a better option where it's so fast, it's over with. You don't need to see it. You can do it in the comfort of your own home or wherever you happen to be in the world. It's looking at not just the device, but the whole process as a whole, and saying, how can we do this better in the future? If you look at some of the processes that you use in Six Sigma and other areas, and you apply that to how we've always done it, there's real opportunity for change for the better.
Yeah, and just to recap a little bit, so not only the administration of intravenous solutions, help me out with the category here. Injection drugs.
Injectable
Is this the
medication.
category we're talking? Thank
Yeah.
you. That's what I'm looking for. I'm showing my ignorance a little bit there. So not only we're talking about the future of injectable medications where conditions may not allow for the placement of an IV line or where you may not want to be dealing with IVs, but also the broader distribution of either vaccines or other medications, in a more direct to consumer sense, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's so often people need to come in for shots. And it's whether it's a vaccine or for formulations that are focused on other areas of their care. And you're putting a patient at risk. It's the time driving there. It's at the cost to have them come in. It's the inefficiency of a trained healthcare provider and the patient. So just like, keep people at home. Let's look at where we can move healthcare and into the comfort of their own home to reduce the burden of some of the things that are critical, where you need that advanced medical training to reduce costs and improve efficiencies.
I'm having a thought. I'm having a brainwave right here, and if I put you really on the spot, I hope you'll tell me. So, in my estimation, the direct to consumer model, for lack of a better term, I know we're not exactly talking about that. You do need to have a provider involved at some level, I would expect. But I would imagine solving for that, the vast majority of patients, especially those with kids. So, rather than hauling them to the pediatrician for something routine, let's have it sent to the house. So if we can get the provider aspect solved, the delivery to the home solved, both of those seem like pretty low bars to clear. Have you given any thought to the paperwork side of this? That little Johnny can't go to the next grade unless we show proof of vaccination here. And I know we're looking way down the line, but on the compliance side, just the administrivia side, have you given any thought to solving for that?
Right. So, yeah, prescriptions, right, and documentation of that. And there's so many ways that we can document now through given, even just through iPhones and whatnot. I think of how I document to return a motorized scooter. It's just like,
Yeah,
they really
right.
left it for you. I'm like, so there's like, it really, you can get so creative with what you're able to do with other supporting technology. For all of our auto injectors, you have serialization on it as well too. There's so much that we can do with barcodes. So there's a lot that we can do when we want to get creative in terms of documentation that this has actually really happened. You can addition of AI as well. It'd be like you bring people in all on a video conference, everyone, like 30 people all at once, pull off the cap, press it against your leg, right? It's so there's no shortage of ways that we could capture that.
Okay, well, you've thought much more about it than me. I saw that as like, oh, maybe we'll have to figure out a good way to ensure that the schools are happy and the state registries for standard immunizations are happy. It doesn't sound like too big of a deal. And you
Yeah.
actually hit on a dog whistle for me. AI. Have you been keeping up with any of the AI and healthcare news? Are you tracking any of this stuff?
Yeah, AI is just, it's incredible in what we're able to do with AI now. I love innovation. I love to see where things are going. Through some of the conferences I've been in, I've had the opportunity to speak with other founders who are doing some really amazing work with our auto injector. Because it's so small, we've added accessory attachments so it could snap to the back of your iPhone. It could snap to an alligator clip to children's sport shorts. So the nice thing about that is people can carry it in the way that they want, but it also allows us to add in additional technology to be able to provide a more of a holistic user experience. So more to come on that, where first thing is to get it in people's hands, and then there's a lot that we're going to be able to do in the future that we're super excited about. But I love where AI is heading into being able to help innovation, from the formulation development to capturing patients' needs to at-home healthcare. It's what what we're seeing.
Yeah, we're starting to see some really neat stuff.
Really?
There's been a few kind of less impressive displays of it over the last week or so. But the Sora product, the video AI generator from the folks that made ChatGPT, that is mind blowing what that can do. And I know we're really just scratching the surface. Have you seen any of those clips from Sora?
Yeah, it's really incredible. And hearing about some of the additional innovation that's coming is, yes, there is an opportunity for, as for anything, for it could be used. And I know that there's concerns on how things could be used in negative ways, but I really think that the overall trajectory for artificial intelligence is just limitless. It's incredible what we're going to be able to do in the future.
I'm with you. I'm tuned in. I think in some instances in healthcare, it's kind of a hammer looking for a nail today. There's certainly some really good applications for AI in healthcare. Some of it on the provider documentation side is a little too new, I think. And we're getting a little bit off topic to speak about physician documentation and the burdens that they face. But on the whole, it's something to stay tuned to for sure.
Definitely. I'm excited to see what's coming.
Yeah, and it's coming every day too. The coolest one I saw, and we'll bring us back to the point here, was NYU created a tool that will scan or look at PDFs of scanned medical records that are just handwritten, and they're able to create structured data out of what would be stacks and stacks of just paper forms, and then you can have analytics on that and decide which patients need to see you now as opposed to those that can wait. So those types of things are especially exciting.
Oh,
But to,
especially if you look at what people have having to do historically by hand, and the time that it takes. Like, couldn't their time be spent i- doing something better? And it seems as though that's bringing those efficiencies to providers is is key.
And we need them. And some of the value adds you've shared around RX bands is giving the power to administer injectable medications to those that don't need the full fledged medical training, rather the specialized training. This lack of provider time spent on medicine is driving a mass extinction event in the career. It really is. Doctors are retiring earlier than expected. They're not entering students aren't entering medical school because they don't want to deal with being their own administrator and physician. It's scary. But with what you shared, that I don't really like this word, but democratizing the administration of injectable medications on an as needed basis, that definitely helps healthcare on the whole. No question about it.
We're trying to help healthcare in the whole, save lives, make a difference, not just for the people who require the injectable medication, but for the families who are impacted as well.
It matters for the whole value chain. And that's not always a usual finding when you're talking about healthcare, when it helps everybody involved. Usually it's two out of three sides, right? Either provider and payer or patient, but not usually all three.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're hopefully, we'll be in patients' hands in the next couple of years and be able to really make that difference and save lives.
And to that point, Jessica, where can folks stay in tune either with you or the journey of RX bands? Do you want to point them to a website or any social media? Where can they get more of you?
Absolutely. So at rxbands.com, or you can also connect with me on LinkedIn.
We'll be sure to have these links in the show notes, but that's
Mhm.
rxbandz.com. Link for
And
visits.
and I can be reached by email at jessica at rxbands.com.
We'll get that in the show notes for you too. Well, Jessica, any final thoughts as we kind of close out our chat here?
I appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you're doing to share people's stories and innovation and progression in life sciences. So, thank you from me and all of your other listeners.
It is completely our pleasure to have innovators in healthcare on the show. And what you're doing, as we've said a couple of times, will change the status quo across all different care settings for all different kinds of people. So that's really cool. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And on behalf of the entire Doc Buddy team, I want to thank you for listening or for watching. Be sure that you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you like the video feed, be sure you're subscribed on YouTube if you're seeing this on LinkedIn or on the artist formerly known as Twitter, which is X. And until next time, I'm your host, Eric Sunset. We'll talk to you again soon.